Check, 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 check. We're good over here. Check, check, check. It just going out there. Hello? Okay.
All right, we are here and present, and I guess we'll take any questions that anyone may have.
Yeah.
No questions?
Just for a moment.
We're gonna start. We're gonna take on-topic questions only. Okay. We're only taking on-topic. So,
What's on top?
does anyone have any questions about the conference?
Go ahead.
In your reference about being arrested and then being let go, was that a reference to Fox?
I think it's a reference to what's happening across the country. We have these pendulum swings in criminal justice where you see something that happens. Obviously, the murder of George Floyd was like a volcano erupting. And it not only swept across the country, but it swept across the world. And so the response belatedly was, we've got to do something about criminal justice reform. Which, look, no one thinks that what happened with George Floyd or some of the other horrible cases involving police misconduct or police murder are appropriate. But we have to still bring peace and safety to our cities. And so while some legislators will say, oh, we need to do this, we need to do this, meanwhile, people on the block need to be safe. And when our officers are out there literally risking life and limb to bring people who are wreaking havoc to justice, working with the local prosecutors to put together the strongest possible case, only to see those people who have a long rap sheet. Mayor Adams is right. We're not talking about the one-time person who makes a mistake. The people who are causing the greatest harm in our communities are habitual offenders who have long rap sheets, who have demonstrated, in my view, that they are a danger to the community. And to see those people charged with crimes of violence, with the exacting standards that our prosecutors now have just to bring a probable cause case, to have them back on the street 24 or 48 hours later, destroys the legitimacy and credibility of the entire criminal justice system. And particularly for those victims or witnesses that we are constantly trying to build confidence with, to build trust with, when they see something like that happen in that very person who shot up the neighborhood, walking down the street, biggest day, that erodes all the progress that we have made. So we have got to say, I think as mayors, we can't have this. Yes, of course, nobody believes that police should be acting with excessive force or with a lack of constitutionality or with no consciousness of building trust and relationships with community members. But the other side of that spectrum is dangerous, violent, habitual offenders need to be locked up pre-trial, because otherwise it sends a message to the other ones that there's no consequences for your criminal conduct.
And I want to, because this is so important, what Mayor Lightfoot is saying. And we have witnessed this throughout history, from Rodney King, Clifford Glover, Randolph Evans, Arthur Miller. These are cases of people who had negative encounters with police. You see this pendulum swing far to one end of the spectrum after these incidents, or you see a horrific crime and the pendulum will swing far to the next level. As mayors were saying, let's stop this swinging and deal with the practical aspects of proper policing and public safety. They can coexist. But if you allow the extremes of both ends of the spectrum, you don't get that quality policing. You get a reactionary process. Knee-jerk reaction can't become a public safety reaction. We see that because we have to manage our police forces to make sure they're doing the right job, and then we have to manage the concerns of everyday citizens who are seeing these repeated offenders. Criminal justice reform is a great idea. I advocated for it as a police officer, as a state senator, as a borough president. And the overwhelming number of people who benefit from criminal justice reform is a real win. But those numbers, particularly in New York, 2,000 extreme recidivists, you arrest them on one day, they're back out doing violent crimes the next day. That's just unacceptable. And that is what we're saying as mayors. We are in the cities where we're seeing the extreme measures on both ends of the spectrum being carried out.
Yes. Could one of you all talk about the historic nature of having the 4 largest cities in this country led by African Americans? Because depending on what happens in Houston later this year, this might not be the case next year. So could you talk about the historic nature of having that?
Well, I think if you look back just on when things started, there were none. So, I mean, there are 4 today, but prior to December the 12th of last year, when Mayor Karen Bass came in, there were 3, and if you back up, there were none. I am the second African-American mayor of the city of Houston, and I'm the 62nd. And Lee P. Brown, former police chief, became mayor, and that was in 1997, 98, right around that time. And so some years later, so I was the second for Mayor Adams. Were you?
I'm a number 2, too.
Number 2?
I'm the first African-American woman and the third African-American mayor in Chicago.
So, I mean, it is historic. And then when you magnify that by the top largest 4 cities now being run by African Americans, and when you factor in the GDP that's under our management and the millions of people that are under it, that is significant. And then don't lose sight of the fact that we are not African American, we don't have African American majorities. So it's not like, these are 4 cities where the African Americans are in the majority. These are cities that are highly, highly diverse, where African Americans are not in the majority, but we have stepped forward. And then the other thing that I would add is that we've come forth at some difficult, challenging times. Okay, so that needs to be made very clear. We are now leading cities in some very challenging times when the politics is so toxic. But we are still called upon to manage effectively these cities that represent the economic engine, and not only the cities, the states in which we reside, but the country as well. Please.
And I think, Mayor Turner, let's be clear, America is the most powerful country on the globe. And we are representing the 4 biggest cities in the most powerful country on the globe. And that cannot be understated. And not only are we the mayors in these 4 cities, but we are navigating, and we have navigated these cities out of one of the most darkest periods in modern time. The COVID pandemic devastated these cities. The economic engine of my city is Wall Street. We're having a terrible year. We were dealing with crime, overproliferation of guns. We were dealing with mental health crises that were probably never seen before in this country. And then to add on that, my bond rating was raised to a AA bond rating because of how I was able to find efficiencies in my agencies. And if you would remove the $4.2 billion that have been dropped into my city because of a mismanaged asylum seeker issue, you will probably witness one of the greatest fiscal turnarounds in the history of New York City. The success of bringing back my tourism, the success of recovering 99% of our jobs, the fastest recovery throughout the entire country. We're bringing on jobs at a pace that is leading the state and the city. So you're seeing successful CEOs in the most powerful country on the globe is being held by 4 black men and women. And I think there's something divine about the fact it's 2 and 2. So we're not good just because we're men. We're not good just because we're women. We're good because we're coming together, bringing our skills. But then do an analysis of who we are. And you really start to unravel the story. Unravel the story of living in public housing. Unravel the stories of dealing with the hurdles that both Mayor Bass and Mayor Lightfoot had to go through. Unravel my journey. And then you'll really appreciate that we bring that holistic approach to governing during this complex time. And, you know, people criticize me for my spiritual connection, but I think this is an Esther 14th moment. God made us for such a time like this. That's why we're here, being the mayors of these cities during a time when America needs this type of leadership.
Yes, sir.
Talked about the priorities you talked about and the strain that's being put on your cities by the asylum question and the people who are entering your cities, and what you'd want the president and the White House to hear about what it is that you're going through.
Well, I'll start. And no city's, I think, been as challenged as New York City, but to the extent that we have in Chicago, Washington, D.C., where we are, Denver, this is a national problem that deserves and needs a national solution. We cannot be welcoming country, welcoming cities without the resources to actually care for these folks who have come from traumatic, awful circumstances in their home countries, whether it's economic, whether it's political, whether it's something else, or a combination of the above, get to our borders, have folks paroled into our country legally, and then say, fend for yourself. That's unacceptable. It's unacceptable, frankly, that more wasn't done to stop Greg Abbott in Texas, to stop DeSantis in Florida, to stop Ducey in Arizona, from trying to politicize this problem, but importantly, absolutely failing to recognize the humanity of the people who they were shipping around the country like freight. That is creating and manufacturing and exacerbating a humanitarian crisis. And so what we have been asking for is the resources to be able to help these folks. And I'm a broken record on this. It is inhumane to allow people to come to this country legally and not expedite the process for getting them work permits. I could put every single one of the 2,400 folks, many of whom were adults, to work yesterday if we had work permits for these folks. It is a significant problem that we have all been very, very vocal about. And I understand it's fraught politically and all of that, but we're dealing with human beings every single day, and we are on the front lines. And like Mayor Adams, like Mayor Bowser, I'm here in Washington, D.C., I've sat with these folks who've come off these buses, seen the trauma that they have experienced and the look of fear and trepidation in their eyes. I have seen the women who literally can't get to a hospital soon enough and give birth in our shelters. Having people stacked up against each other. It's not right. And we're doing the best that we can, but we have got to get additional resources from the federal government. We're all sitting with worry and fear about what's going to happen on May 11th when Title 42 goes away. This is a national problem that deserves a national solution, and not each city fending for itself and trying to solve it. We've developed great unity and partnership, but we've got to have help from the federal government, pure and simple.
Thank you. We are at time. Thank you.
Thank you all.